Hey, this is Matt Heisler from Inside Real Estate, and today we're going to dive into real estate and talk about an investor strategy, which is often called subject to. I'm going to talk about subject to because it is there's a lot of information about subject to out there on the internet, and I'm here to sort of tell you the stuff they don't usually tell you when they talk about subject to. It's usually a good lead in, a powerful lead in for early stage investors. And today we're going to talk about why it's a little bit more difficult to execute than they would want you to believe, just so that you're up to date. So we're gonna get started right here and dive right in. And some of you may be saying, what is subject to? Well, subject to is basically a legal term that you can put in any contract that says this is a condition. So if you agree to buy a car and you say it's subject to a mechanic looking at it, then you've created a subject to condition. But in subject to, most of the time when we're talking about in investing, what we're really talking about is buying a house subject to recording it at a later date. Okay. So what you're really agreeing to do is take over responsibility for the house, and that includes the existing mortgage, but you're not going to do so officially. You're going to do it legally with a contract, but you're not going to do it officially by recording that contract. And the reason you're not going to do it officially by recording that contract is because you don't have the money to pay the seller for his property at that time. And that is the beauty of subject to investing. Subject to investing requires no capital at all. Well, why would a seller do it? A seller would do it if he decided that a property was too much work or too much hassle and no longer thought that there was any equity to be gained in the property and is just as happy giving the mortgage to someone else. Now, we're going to talk about the seller's motivation a little bit more down the line, but in the meantime, we're just going to leave it at that. Okay, the real benefit to most people that are doing subject to, and the reason it's so popular out there on the internet, the reason why it gains so much traction is it requires no capital. It does not require any money. Okay, it does not require you getting a mortgage. It does not require a down payment. Now, why would you acquire a property this way? Well, basically, by acquiring a property this way, you gain all the upside in the property. So if the property needs a new kitchen, you can buy the property subject to zero money, go in and fix up the kitchen, which costs money, then sell the property, and then record both deeds at the same time, netting you a profit because you did the improvements. If you're super lucky, you can just find a property that the seller isn't aware of what it's worth, immediately put it on the market, sell it for another 40 or $50,000 before after expenses, and then walk away from the closing table with $40,000 on a house that you only owned for about 25 minutes, officially owned on 25 minutes. Because when you sell it to somebody else, what you do is you finally record the deed and your ownership. Okay. You record that the very same moment that you actually record it for the other person. So you only own it for a few minutes. And by the time it all goes to record, the only thing that's left over is to distribute the funds. This sounds amazing, right? So fantastic. And again, this is why people get excited about wholesaling. This is why they learn a lot about it on the internet, and it's pretty fantastic. You can do it on single families, you can do it on multifamilies. There's not a lot of restrictions here, and there are a number of different flavors of the kinds of way that you can do this. So wholesaling is usually that example that I talked about in the first place, where basically you find something that's undervalued by the seller and then you immediately put it on the market, and then you walk away with a small premium for doing him the honor of selling his property for him. So, but again, there are all sorts of different ways that you can do subject to. You can do them to start fix and flips. You can do them to start your investment journey by, collecting rent from in a multifamily situation and then start to generate cash flow from someone who's looking to get out of the property uh, and isn't looking to sell it necessarily, but just looking to get rid of either the tenants or the mortgage. So all of that sounds pretty great for the person executing the subject to. Now, usually if it's a good deal for someone, it's not a good deal for the other person who the deal is being made to. So why would a seller not want to do a subject to deal? And I'm sure you think, well, I'm sure everyone wants to do that. Well, if you own the property, would you would you give the mortgage to somebody else and sell it to them and give up your upside of that property? And I'm sure now you're thinking, well, no, I wouldn't do that. My goal is to buy property and hold on to it until I make as much money as possible. Well, it turns out everyone else, when they buy a property, that's pretty much their mindset too. So the problem with sellers doing subject to deals is most of the time they're either giving up most or all of the potential upside and appreciation in a property. That's usually not why they bought it, right? So they must be pretty financially strapped and really trying to get out from under that mortgage if this is what it is that they're thinking is the right solution. The other problems are a little bit more technical, but ultimately, when they sign their mortgage, there's a 99.99% chance that in that mortgage it says, by the way, you can't sell that property without paying us off. Seller, by selling you the property, not paying off the mortgage and not recording it, means that they are in fact committing mortgage fraud, which is not really great for them. But the biggest problem that every seller takes on is the fact that maybe in this contract that says you're going to take over the mortgage and take care of the property, maybe you don't do those things. I mean, a lot of times when people are doing subject to mortgages, they don't know the opposing party very well. If you're not paying the mortgage or not taking care of the property, well, the seller has very limited recourse for that. They can take you to court and say this person agreed to take care of the property and pay me and pay my mortgage, and they're not doing either of those things. But that's going to take months to get settled out. And by then, the seller's going to be in a whole bunch of trouble. Maybe they're in foreclosure trouble and the fees are starting to I mean, it's hard to know exactly what would happen because it can go sideways so quickly if you don't honor your commitments. And I'm not saying that you would do that. I think most people that do subject to agreements do fully intend to honor those commitments that they made to the seller because there's an opportunity for them to make money. But I'm sure there are situations where they do not for various reasons. And then really the problem is that the seller, even in a short-term basis, is on the hook. And the way this country is set up, there's no immediate recourse for that kind of stuff. You can't just wander into a police station and say, this guy owes me money, because of this contract. Police don't solve problems like that. The whole purpose of this video is really to talk about the wholesaler problems. Okay. This is the stuff that they're not going to tell you out there on the internet when they tell you you don't need cash, you don't need a loan, you can buy property without any of these things. So the problem here is, again, let's go back and let's look at our target profile. Needs to be someone who really, really, really doesn't want to pay that mortgage. And it's usually because they're really, really financially strapped. So they got to be in all sorts of money problems, right? And that's not the typical case. There are not a lot of those people. And on top of that, they have to be willing to agree to a contract where they don't actually sell the property, which would probably be the best outcome for them, right? Then they know they don't have to pay any more money. But instead, they're going to trust somebody else to come in there and either fix the property and sell it later or just sell the property for them and make more money because they don't want to deal with it. I mean, I don't know what their reasons might be. I'm sure that they vary. But at the end of the day, you need someone who's pretty desperate financially and maybe not so smart about solving the problems that they've gotten themselves into. So, even in a rough economy, maybe 1 or 2% of all the homeowners out there get into foreclosure difficulty. It's not that common a thing, right? And then on top of that, you have to find someone really who's maybe not so smart about how to get out of the problem that they're into. And so that's a pretty tough combination. You need someone who's financially in trouble, maybe 2% of the people out there at best. And then you need someone who really thinks that you're the white knight that's ridden in on the white horse in order to solve their financial problems, and that this is really sort of the best deal they're going to get. That's sort of a tricky thing to find. I know it's like 2 out of every 1,000 people. Those aren't great odds. So the problem for your wholesalers and the people that want to do subject to financing isn't necessarily doing the deals, although the deals are complicated and involve risk generally too. And you need really good numbers to do them. You need to make sure you're getting in at the right number and getting out at the right number. You know what it's going to cost to fix it, et cetera, et cetera. The real problem here is that you've got to find someone who fits these parameters and is willing to do this kind of deal. Well, how would you find this person? Well, I can tell you, I'm just trying to find regular home sellers all the time, and it's not so easy. In fact, I started a whole YouTube channel so that I can find buyers, sellers, and investors just like you. But the reality is finding someone in this market who just wants to do traditional sales, of which there are far more people, isn't so easy. So the bottom line is, even though it sounds like a really good idea to be able to buy something without capital, you still have to find the right place where you can execute that kind of deal. You're not likely to bump into them as you're driving around doing your life. You're going to need to set up some level of marketing, either social media or, you know, real ads, print, TV, cable, whatever. You're going to need to do some ads, and those ads are going to be expensive. And of course, the whole reason you got into subject to begin with was you didn't have any capital. And so maybe some of you are thinking, well, I can probably find a couple of deals by spending $1,000 in advertising. No, no, it's not going to be $1,000. It's probably going to be $5,000 to find one maybe legitimate deal, or $10,000 to find a particular deal. And that money is going to come out of your margin when you actually do the wholesaling deal. So you should know that up front. But it isn't going to be easy to find these people. And it certainly isn't going to be cheap. It's either going to require a lot of time. You can knock on doors if you want. Just go up and down the street, see if you can find people who are home and then who are financially desperate and think subject to is a great solution. But at the end of the day, it's either going to cost you time or money. So the real secret that I'm trying to get out to people here today is that subject to is certainly a very interesting investment strategy, but there is a reason not everybody does it, and the reason is because it is very hard to find prospects for these kinds of deals, and a lot of times people are surprised at how difficult it is. So I hope that helped everyone. If it helped you, make sure you subscribe. Note that I have a number of other things on here for investors, and if you're just a regular home buyer or a home seller or a regular home investor, feel free to reach out to me and I can help you navigate this market also. Take care.